On the afternoon of January 4th, 1941, nurse Pauline Kneisler stands at the second-floor window of Hadamar Psychiatric Institution, watching a grey transport bus lumber up the tree-lined drive. The winter sky presses down like wet wool. She's seen 12 of these buses in the past 3 weeks. She knows what they carry. The engine cuts. 6 men in civilian clothes emerge, sliding open the bus door. Through the frosted glass, Pauline can make out shapes inside, human shapes. Some moving, some still. She counts them as they're led down the steps. 32 patients, all women this time. Their breath makes small clouds in the January cold. Pauline turns from the window and opens her leather-bound notebook. She uncaps her fountain pen. In neat, precise handwriting, she records the date, the time of arrival, the number of patients. She doesn't know their names yet. She will by tonight. By tonight, they'll all be dead. And Pauline Kneisler, dutiful nurse, loyal German, quiet keeper of records, will have written it all down. What she doesn't know, what she cannot possibly know on this grey January afternoon, is that her meticulous notes will travel across an ocean and through a war. They will survive bombing raids and burning. They will be held up in a courtroom in Nuremberg by American prosecutors. They will help hang the men she works for. This is the story of how one woman's compulsive documentation became evidence of mass murder. To understand how Pauline Kneisler ended up documenting mass murder, we need to go back 2 years earlier, to the summer of 1939. Adolf Hitler has been in power for 6 years. The Nazi regime has already stripped Jews of citizenship, begun forcibly sterilizing people deemed unfit, and created a culture where racial purity is state doctrine. But now, as Germany prepares for war, Hitler and his inner circle develop a new program, one that will push the boundaries of what the state can do to its own citizens. The program has no official name at first. Later it will be called Action T4, named after the address of its headquarters, Tiergartenstrasse 4 in Berlin. The goal is chillingly simple: the systematic murder of disabled people. The Nazi ideology views disability as both a genetic threat and an economic burden. Patients in psychiatric institutions, children with developmental disabilities, adults with chronic illnesses, all are labelled lebensunwertes Leben, life unworthy of life. The state cannot waste resources on them, the thinking goes, not when those resources could support the master race. In July 1939, Hitler meets with his personal physician, Dr. Karl Brandt, and the head of his chancellery, Philipp Bohler. He authorizes them to establish a program of mercy, killing for the incurably ill. The authorization is backdated to September 1st, 1939, the day Germany invades Poland, to make it seem like a wartime necessity. But this won't be crude or chaotic. This will be medical, scientific, efficient. The planners establish a system. Questionnaires are sent to every psychiatric institution, every care home, every facility housing disabled people across Germany. Doctors must fill out detailed forms about their patients. Diagnosis, length of illness, ability to work, race, whether they receive visitors. The forms are colour-coded. They're sent to Berlin, where panels of doctors, most of whom never see the patients, make life or death decisions with a simple mark. A red plus sign means death. A blue dash means temporary reprieve. By late 1939, the killing begins on a small scale. Disabled children are sent to special pediatric units, where they're given overdoses of sedatives. Adults are transferred to isolated institutions where they're killed by injection. But this is too slow, too labor-intensive. The program needs a better method, something that can kill dozens at once, something that leaves no mess, no evidence on the body, no telltale injection mark. In December 1939, they find their answer: carbon monoxide gas. A team led by chemist Dr. August Becker and Dr. Albert Widman conducts the first successful gassing experiment at Brandenburg Prison. They seal a small group of patients in a disguised shower room and pump in carbon monoxide from cylinders. Within minutes, everyone is dead. The bodies show no signs of trauma. It's perfect. The T4 program rapidly expands. 6 killing centers are established across Germany and Austria: Brandenburg, Grafenegg, Hartheim, Sonnenstein, Bernburg, and, in January 1941, Hadamar. This is where Pauline Kneißler comes in. Why does Pauline start keeping her own records? We don't know for certain. She never fully explains it, even later when questioned. But the notebook exists, and it tells us something about her psychology. Perhaps it's habit. She's been a nurse for years, trained to document everything. Perhaps it's a form of control in a situation where she feels powerless. Perhaps, deep down, it's evidence that some part of her knows this is wrong, that history should know what happened here. Or perhaps she's just German, and Germans keep records. The notebook is small, leather-bound, with lined pages. Pauline keeps it in her desk drawer at the nursing station. Each day she records the arrival of buses, the number of patients, details about their conditions and origins. She notes the names of doctors on duty, unusual incidents, changes in procedure. She writes in a mixture of medical shorthand and plain German. Her handwriting is remarkably neat, even when describing horror. January 13th, 1941. Bus arrived 2:45 p.m. 38 patients from Eichberg, mostly chronic cases, processed by 5:30 p.m. She doesn't write murdered or gassed. She uses euphemisms: processed, transferred, finished. But the meaning is clear to anyone who understands the context. By the end of January, Pauline has documented the deaths of more than 400 people. Life in Hadamar develops a grotesque rhythm. Buses arrive 2 or 3 times a week, usually during afternoon shifts, to attract less attention. The staff develops dark jokes. When a bus is approaching, someone will shout, "Here comes the next load." The crematorium operates constantly, visible smoke rising from the chimney. In town, people begin to notice. They smell the smoke. They see the buses. The staff celebrates when they reach milestones. In August 1941, Hadamar murders its 10,000th victim. The staff throws a party. They decorate the crematorium with flowers. Dr. Wallmann gives a speech praising the team's efficiency. Someone has made a fake monument, a cardboard headstone painted to look like stone, inscribed with 10,000. Photos are taken. People smile for the camera. Pauline Kneißler is at that party. We know this because she's in one of the photographs, standing in the back row, unsmiling. She records the celebration in her notebook. August 11th, 1941. 10,000 mark reached. Staff recognition event held. The killing continues through the summer. June, July, August. Hundreds more deaths. Pauline documents them all. The notebook grows thick with entries. Then, in August 1941, something happens that changes everything. The T4 program was supposed to be secret. But you can't kill tens of thousands of people without someone noticing. By the summer of 1941, rumors are spreading across Germany. Families receive death certificates with inconsistent information. A patient dies of appendicitis when the appendix was removed years ago, or dies at an institution hundreds of miles from where the family knew them to be. The grey buses are spotted everywhere. The smoke from crematoriums is visible and constant. In small towns near killing centres like Hadamar, school children make up rhymes. Here comes the murder box. They're going to gas you next. Some institutions refuse to cooperate. Some doctors refuse to fill out the questionnaires. Some families, suspecting the truth, refuse to allow their relatives to be transferred. And then the churches get involved. In July 1941, Clemens August Graf von Galen, the Catholic Bishop of Münster, delivers 3 powerful sermons condemning the murders. He speaks with unusual directness. He accuses the regime of murder, of violating God's commandments, of turning Germany into a nation where the vulnerable are hunted. He demands the prosecution of those responsible. If you establish and apply the principle that you can kill unproductive fellow human beings, Galen thunders, then woe betide us all when we become old and frail. Copies of the sermon are printed and distributed across Germany. The Nazis are furious, but Galen is too prominent, too beloved to simply arrest. Killing a bishop would create a martyr and risk turning Catholics against the regime at a time when Hitler needs unity for the war effort. The pressure builds. Protestant pastors join the criticism. Families file legal complaints. The rumour mill churns. The programme is supposed to be secret, but everyone knows. On August 24th, 1941, Hitler orders the T4 programme officially stopped. It's a rare public retreat for the Nazi regime, but it's also strategic. By this point, the programme has killed approximately 70,000 disabled people. The immediate goal, reducing the population of psychiatric institutions to free up hospital beds for wounded soldiers, has been largely achieved, and the infrastructure and personnel can be redeployed elsewhere. Many T4 staff will soon be transferred to occupied Poland to work at new facilities with names like Treblinka, Sobibor and Belzec, where the killing will continue on an even larger scale, targeting Jews instead of disabled Germans. But the shutdown isn't complete. The killing centres officially close, but a second, more decentralised phase begins, what historians call wild euthanasia. Patients in institutions across Germany continue to be killed, but now through starvation, overdoses and neglect rather than gas chambers. This phase will continue until the end of the war and kill at least another 100,000 people. At Hadamar, the gas chamber stops operating in September 1941. The buses stop coming. The crematorium falls silent. Pauline Kneissler makes a final entry in her notebook. September 5th, 1941. Last transport received. Programme concluding. She has documented the deaths of approximately 10,500 people in 8 months. For the next 3.5 years, the notebook sits in Pauline's possession. She doesn't destroy it, though that would be the logical thing to do. She doesn't hide it particularly well either. She keeps it among her personal things, first at the institution, later at her family home after she stops working at Hadamar in 1942. The war grinds on. Germany invades the Soviet Union. The United States enters the war. The tide slowly turns against the Nazis. Allied bombs begin falling on German cities. The killing of disabled people continues through wild euthanasia, but Pauline is no longer directly involved. In March 1945, American forces approach Hadamar. The staff tries to destroy evidence. Documents are burned. The gas chamber equipment is dismantled. But there's too much to erase completely. On March 26, 1945, the U.S. Army's 5th Armored Division enters Hadamar. They find mass graves. They find the crematorium, still full of ashes. They find patients who survived the second phase of killings, emaciated and traumatized. They find file cabinets full of documents that staff didn't have time to burn. And they find Pauline Kneissler's notebook. The discovery happens almost by accident. A military intelligence officer, Lieutenant William Sweet, is questioning staff members and searching their quarters. He finds the notebook in a desk drawer in Pauline's old room. It's not hidden, just sitting there with other papers and personal items. Sweet can't read German fluently, but he understands enough to know what he's found. The dates, the numbers, the clinical language describing mass death. He bags it as evidence and sends it up the chain of command. Within weeks, the notebook is in the hands of American prosecutors preparing for war crimes trials. The Nuremberg trials are the most famous war crimes proceedings in history, but they're actually a series of trials, not just one. The main international military tribunal tries the senior Nazi leadership between November 1945 and October 1946. But following that, the Americans conduct 12 additional trials under military jurisdiction, focusing on specific groups: doctors, judges, industrialists, military commanders. The Hadamar case feeds into both the doctors' trial and a separate trial specifically for Hadamar staff. American investigators descend on Hadamar in the summer of 1945. They exhume mass graves. They interview survivors. They collect thousands of pages of documents. They arrest doctors, nurses, administrators, crematorium workers, anyone involved in the program. Pauline Kneissler is arrested in June 1945. She is initially held at a detention facility in Wiesbaden while investigators prepare their case. When confronted with her notebook, she doesn't deny writing it. She confirms the dates, the numbers, the details. But she insists she was just following orders, that she didn't personally kill anyone, that she was a nurse doing administrative work. This defense, following orders, will be heard again and again at Nuremberg. It will be comprehensively rejected. The notebook becomes Prosecution Exhibit 47 in what's known as the Hadamar trial. It's one of the most damning pieces of evidence the Americans have. Unlike testimony, which can be disputed, or documents that might be forgeries, the notebook is clearly authentic. It's written in Pauline's hand. It contains details only someone present could know. It corroborates all the other evidence: the death certificates, the transport records, the survivor testimony. In a perverse way, Pauline's compulsive documentation has created a perfect record of the crime. The main Hadamar trial begins on October 8th, 1945, at a military court in Wiesbaden. It's one of the first Nazi war crimes trials, starting even before the main Nuremberg proceedings. 7 defendants sit in the dock: Dr. Adolf Wallmann, Dr. Günther Hennecke, Chief Administrator Alphonse Klein, nurses Irmgard Huber and Luise Pflaume, and 2 crematorium workers, Heinrich Ruff and Karl Willig. Pauline Kneissler is not among them. She's been listed as a witness instead. The prosecutors have made a calculated decision. Her cooperation and her notebook are too valuable. They offer her immunity in exchange for testimony. It's a devil's bargain. But the prosecutors need her. She can explain the daily operations, the administrative systems, the chain of command. And her notebook provides the timeline and numbers that turn this from abstract horror into documented mass murder. The trial lasts just over a month. The prosecutors present overwhelming evidence. Documents, photographs, the testimony of survivors who witnessed patients being led away, the physical evidence from the gas chamber and crematorium. And they present Pauline Kneissler's notebook. On October 23rd, Pauline takes the stand. She's 39 years old now, thin and pale after months in detention. She speaks in a quiet, flat voice. Yes, she worked at Hadamar. Yes, she kept these notes. Yes, she knew what was happening to the patients. The prosecutor, Major Leon Jaworski, who will later become famous as the Watergate Special Prosecutor, walks her through the notebook page by page. He has her read entries aloud. He asks her to explain the euphemisms, to confirm what processed means, what finished means. Did you know these people were being killed? Jaworski asks. Yes, Pauline says. Did you believe this was legal? A pause. We were told it was ordered by the state. Did you believe it was right? Another pause. I was a nurse. I was following instructions. You could have refused. You could have left. And gone where? Pauline's voice is bitter now. This was war. You didn't just quit. The defense attorneys try to minimize their clients' roles. They argue that the defendants were following orders from Berlin, that they had no choice, that refusal would have meant their own deaths. They point out that none of the defendants personally designed the T4 program or made policy decisions. But the prosecutors counter with a simple argument. These people weren't mindless automatons. They were educated professionals, doctors, nurses, administrators. They knew murder was wrong. They knew what they were doing. And many of them seemed to enjoy it. The photographs from the 10,000 victims celebration are particularly damning. On November 15th, 1945, the military tribunal delivers its verdict. All 7 defendants are found guilty of murder. 3 are sentenced to death by hanging. Klein, Ruff, and Willig, the administrator and the crematorium workers who were most directly involved in the killing process. 4 receive lengthy prison sentences. Wahlmann gets life, Hennecker gets 35 years, Huber gets 25 years, Pflaume gets 15 years. The sentences are carried out at Bruchsal prison on March 14th, 1946. Klein, Ruff, and Willig are hanged. Their executions attract little attention. They're not prominent Nazis, just functionaries in a vast machine of death. Pauline Kneissler walks free. Her immunity deal holds. She's released from detention in December 1945 after the trial concludes. For the rest of her life, she will insist she did nothing wrong, that she was simply a nurse doing her job, that the real criminals were the people in Berlin who gave the orders. But her notebook tells a different story. It tells of someone who documented atrocity with the same meticulous care she might have used to record patient medications or meal schedules. Someone who was present for and complicit in mass murder, and who wrote it all down. The Hadamar case also feeds into the larger doctor's trial, which runs from December 1946 to August 1947 in Nuremberg. This trial prosecutes 23 doctors and administrators involved in Nazi medical experiments and the T4 program. The evidence from Hadamar, including Pauline's notebook, is used to establish the broader pattern of medical killing under the Nazi regime. The prosecutors argue that German doctors betrayed their Hippocratic oath, turning medicine into an instrument of genocide. The doctors' trial produces the Nuremberg Code, a landmark set of ethical principles for human experimentation. The code establishes the absolute necessity of informed consent, the requirement that experiments must benefit society, and the principle that participants must be able to withdraw at any time. It's a direct response to the horrors documented in places like Hadamar, where medicine became murder. Of the 23 defendants in the doctor's trial, 7 are sentenced to death by hanging, 9 receive prison terms, and 7 are acquitted. The executions are carried out at Landsberg Prison on June 2nd, 1948. Among those hanged is Dr. Karl Brandt, Hitler's personal physician and one of the architects of the T4 program. His last words are reportedly, "I have fulfilled my duty." The trials send shockwaves through the medical community worldwide. How could doctors, people trained to heal, become mass murderers? The answer is complex. Ideology, careerism, bureaucratic distance from victims, the dehumanization of patients through medical language, and the perverse belief that killing the disabled was somehow therapeutic, a form of healing the national body. The Hadamar evidence is particularly powerful because it shows the banality of evil. The way ordinary nurses and doctors participated in industrial-scale murder through routine administrative processes. Pauline Kneissler didn't see herself as a killer. She saw herself as a record keeper. But her records documented death. There's a postscript to the Hadamar story that's often overlooked. The 1945 trial focused on the first phase of killings, the gas chamber phase from January to September 1941. But remember, Hadamar didn't stop being a killing centre. It just changed methods. From 1942 to 1945, Hadamar operated as a wild euthanasia facility. Patients were killed through starvation, overdoses of sedatives, and deliberate neglect. This phase killed approximately 4,500 more people, including hundreds of forced labourers from Eastern Europe who became too sick or injured to work. A second Hadamar trial is held in 1947, prosecuting the staff involved in this later phase. Dr. Vollmann, already serving a life sentence, receives an additional death sentence in this trial. He's executed in 1947. Several nurses and administrators receive additional prison terms. But Pauline Kneissler is never charged in connection with the second phase. She stopped working at Hadamar in 1942, and her notebook doesn't cover the later killings. She remains free. After her release in December 1945, Pauline Kneissler returns to her family home in rural Hesse. She never works as a nurse again. The trial has made her notorious in the region, the nurse who kept the death records. Some see her as a victim who was following orders. Others see her as a collaborator who enabled mass murder. She lives quietly, rarely speaking about Hadamar. In the 1960s, a journalist tracks her down for an interview. She's in her 50s now, still unmarried, living alone. She insists she did nothing wrong. "I was a nurse," she says. "I kept records. That was my job. I didn't kill anyone." When asked why she kept the notebook, she seems genuinely puzzled by the question. Someone had to keep track. It was important to maintain proper documentation. The journalist asks if she feels any guilt. Guilt for what? Pauline replies. For doing my job? For following the rules? It's a chilling answer because it reveals the depth of her moral blindness. She genuinely doesn't seem to understand that keeping meticulous records of mass murder makes you complicit in that murder. She's compartmentalized her role so thoroughly that she can't see her own responsibility. Pauline Kneissler dies in 1978 at age 72. She's buried in a small Catholic cemetery near Hadamar. Her gravestone bears only her name and dates. No epitaph, no description of her life. Her notebook remains in the archives, a permanent testament to bureaucratic complicity in genocide. Today, Pauline Kneissler's notebook is housed in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. It sits in climate-controlled storage alongside millions of other documents from the Holocaust and Nazi persecution. Researchers can request to view it, and digital scans are available online. It's a slim volume, perhaps 200 pages, filled with neat handwriting. To a casual observer, it might look like any nursing logbook from the 1940s. Dates, numbers, brief notations. You have to read closely to understand what it documents. But historians consider it one of the most important pieces of evidence from the T4 program. Most Nazi killing programs were deliberately obscured, documented in euphemisms and code words, or not documented at all. The T4 program left more records than most because it operated within the medical bureaucracy, but even then, many documents were destroyed. Pauline's notebook survives as an unfiltered day-by-day record of mass murder as it happened. It wasn't written for posterity or propaganda. It was written for her own purposes, whatever those were. That makes it uniquely valuable and uniquely horrifying. The notebook has been used in countless books, documentaries, and exhibitions about the Holocaust and medical ethics. It's been cited in Supreme Court cases about euthanasia and patient rights. Medical schools use it when teaching about professional ethics and the dangers of dehumanizing language. The Hadamar site itself is now a memorial. The main building still stands, converted into a museum and memorial center. Visitors can see the basement room where the gas chamber was located, the crematorium, the administrative offices where Pauline worked. There are exhibitions on the T4 program, the victims, the perpetrators, and the aftermath. In the memorial garden, there are 15,000 plaques, one for each victim of Hadamar's 2 killing phases. Some bear names, many say simply unknown. The victims of Hadamar came from all walks of life. They were children with developmental disabilities, adults with chronic mental illness, elderly patients with dementia, people with epilepsy or physical disabilities. They were painters and teachers, farmers and factory workers, someone's child or parent or sibling. They were killed because the state declared them unworthy of life, and a nurse named Pauline Kneissler wrote down every death. The Hadamar case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about complicity and responsibility in systems of atrocity. Pauline Kneissler wasn't an ideologue. There's no evidence she was a committed Nazi or a believer in racial ideology. She didn't design the T4 program or decide which patients should die. She didn't operate the gas chamber or the crematorium. She never personally killed anyone. But she was there. She knew what was happening. She kept records that helped the system operate more efficiently. And she never tried to stop it, never refused, never spoke out. Does that make her a murderer? Legally, no. She was never convicted of a crime. She received immunity for testifying. Morally, That's a harder question. The Nuremberg trials established important principles about individual responsibility. Following orders is not a defense for atrocity. Participants in genocide, even low-level participants, are responsible for their actions. The bureaucratic distance from violence doesn't eliminate moral culpability. But the trials also revealed how difficult these questions can be in practice. Where exactly is the line between victim and perpetrator? What about people who participated under duress or threat? What about people who didn't directly kill, but enabled killing through administrative support? Pauline Kneissler exists in this grey zone. She wasn't coerced at gunpoint. She could have requested a transfer or quit. But she also wasn't free in any meaningful sense. She lived in a totalitarian state at war, where dissent could mean imprisonment or death. She was socialized into a system that normalized the killing of disabled people through medical and bureaucratic language. The most disturbing thing about Pauline Kneissler isn't that she was a monster. It's that she was ordinary. She was a competent professional doing her job, following procedures, keeping records. She believed in order and documentation and proper procedure. These are normally virtues. In the context of Hadamar, they enabled mass murder. This is the lesson of her notebook, that atrocity doesn't require evil masterminds. It requires a system, and that system requires functionaries who will keep it running. It requires doctors who will sign death certificates, administrators who will process paperwork, nurses who will keep records. It requires people who can separate the act from its meaning, who can describe murder in clinical language, who can document horror without feeling horror. People like Pauline Kneissler. On a shelf in Washington, D.C., there sits a small leather notebook. Inside are 200 pages of neat handwriting, documenting 8 months in 1941 when 10,500 disabled people were murdered in a psychiatric institution in central Germany. The woman who wrote those notes never believed she did anything wrong. She was just a nurse, she said, keeping records, doing her job, but her job was documenting murder, and her records helped convict mass killers at Nuremberg. The irony is profound. Pauline Kneissler's compulsive documentation, the very trait that made her a good nurse in the Nazi system, became the instrument that helped expose that system's crimes. She created evidence against the people she worked for, evidence that would be used in court to demonstrate exactly what happened at Hadamar, exactly how many people died, exactly when and how the killing was carried out. She tried to be the perfect bureaucrat in a genocidal system, and in doing so, she created the perfect record of that genocide. Today, medical students learn about Hadamar and the T4 program as a cautionary tale about the corruption of medicine. They're taught to recognize the warning signs, dehumanizing language about patients, bureaucratic distance from suffering, the subordination of medical ethics to state policy. They're taught that being just following orders or just keeping records is never an excuse. They're taught that documentation matters, but so does the purpose of that documentation. You can't maintain professional detachment from evil and claim innocence. And sometimes, in those lectures, a professor will project an image of a page from Pauline Kneissler's notebook on the screen. The students will see the neat handwriting, the dates, the numbers. They'll see the mundane, bureaucratic language describing mass death, and they'll be asked to consider, what would you have done? Would you have refused? Would you have quit? Or would you have kept your head down, done your job, and told yourself you weren't really responsible? It's an uncomfortable question. It's meant to be, because the lesson of Pauline Kneissler's notebook isn't just about Nazi Germany. It's about the capacity for ordinary people to participate in extraordinary evil, especially when that evil is wrapped in professional procedure and bureaucratic routine. It's about the importance of moral courage in the face of systemic wrong. And it's a reminder that someone is always keeping records, that history is always watching, and that one day, if justice prevails, those records will be read aloud in a courtroom, evidence of crimes that people thought they could hide behind following orders and proper procedures. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment telling me what historical topic you'd like me to cover next. I'll see you in the next video.